Hey guys, Nich Angell here. I thought I would give you a little breakdown of how to play Colostle, a solo RPG adventure. Colostle is a solo RPG that I created, designed and illustrated, and I thought I'd give you a little outline of how the game plays, so you can get a sense of how to play it and sort of all the processes and mechanics involved, because there are a few, and it's a little more complicated than some solo RPGs, and a little less complicated and more imaginative and creative than some others. So this will give you a sort of idea of sort of where Colostle sits in the general solo RPG space. And if you're looking at this for the first time and thinking that you might be interested in it, then this might give you an idea of whether Colostle is the game for you. So as you can see here, we have the base book of Colostle, which is really all you need to play the game, along with a journal and a deck of cards. And a pen. All you really need to play are those four things. But the journal, deck of cards, and pen could be your own. I am going to be using today the templated journal, which is available from Colostle.com, and also the official Colossal cards. Neither of which you actually have to have, but they're in keeping with the style of Colossal and everything. The base book is your guide to everything, really. So to give you an idea, this is the inside of the journal, and you can see it's a sort of templated layout, so you can write down everything you need to play, and then I will introduce you to the book itself. So a big thing about the sort of first thing to think about with Colossal is your class, and the class that you choose for your character, which can be anyone you want, by the way, will determine how your character interacts with the two main phases of gameplay in Colossal, and they are exploration and combat. And for each of those, your character will have a stat, and that stat will dictate how you are able to do either of those two things. In Colossal, exploration is the main thing, wandering about, keeping a journal and a diary of your adventures and the things that you see and the stuff your character discovers. Along the way, though, you may draw a card in your exploration phase that will present an opponent to you that you may want to fight. And this is where you can enter into the second part of gameplay, which is combat. Now, pretty much all combat in Colossal is optional. So if you don't feel ready, or you just simply don't fancy fighting today, then you can write in your journal how your character evaded combat this time. And part of how the game plays strategically involves this, because you may think, oh, well, I could just avoid all of the combat. And sure, you can, but you won't get any rewards or treasures if you do that. Coupled with that, sometimes you will literally not be strong enough to fight something that you may have discovered in your exploration phase. And so part of the strategy, in a way, of the game is not taking on fights that your character isn't particularly well equipped for at this stage, and saving those fights for later, and potentially fighting, when you feel stronger, when you've gotten stronger, when you've leveled up a little bit. So we'll focus on your character first, and not to show you all the classes, because this is just an example at this early stage. But if we introduce the followed class, now here's an illustration of them, and the thing about the followed is that they get a rookling to accompany them on their journeys, a little stone, sort of living stone tower that accompanies you as a sort of companion. And as you can see below, here are their two stats for this class. Your character can be whatever you want, but what is fixed in place by the rules are the stats of the class you've chosen. So in this particular case, the followed has a very high exploration score of 5, but has a much lower combat score of 3. This is a class much more designed for navigation, exploration, and discovery. So these numbers dictate how many cards you draw on those particular phases, and I will go through how the gameplay works in each of those phases in a minute. So we're going to pick followed for now to give you an example. So when you start exploring, the big thing you need to look at is this double page spread. This is the exploration tables. And what these do is these tell you what the playing cards that you've drawn that exploration phase equate to. So we're going to do an example of this. My followed character has an exploration score of 5. So I am going to draw 5 cards and see what I get. So we've got a king of spades, 10 of diamonds, 9 of clubs, 3 of clubs, and a jack of spades. So quite a few blacks, only 1 red at the moment. That's fine. And then you can see in the journal here, we've got places to track the prompts that you've made on your exploration phase. So I will quickly write down King of Spades there, that's a rubbish spade, 10 of diamonds, 9 of clubs, 3 of clubs, and the Jack of Spades. There we go. And then I will now check against the exploration table what each of these drawers represents. And this is what my character discovers on this exploration phase, or first day of their adventure. So the King of Spades, if it's a black card, we look in the black section of the table. And if it's a red card, we look in the red section. Red equates to organic things, people or creatures, and black cards equate to scenic things such as structures or objects. So King of Spades is a rook encounter. Any of the face cards means it's a battle. So the first thing I have discovered, and to make that clearer for you, they are here. You can see. So a king is a massive rook. This is a big threat that I have stumbled across. So I'll put massive rook into there. Then we've got 10 of diamonds. 10 of diamonds is a camp of people. At least they look like people. They walk on 2 legs and carry tools in 2 arms, but they're not human. Who are they and what do they want? And because it's diamond, it says you are captured and taken prisoner. So I'm going to write here, captured by non-humanoids. Just noting it down for now. Then we've got the 9 of clubs. 9 of clubs is my calling. I come across a place that is a key to my calling, maybe a building with a clue in it or one of the locations you were looking for on your quest. And the club means it's a clue to the next step on my quest. So I'll explain calling in a second, but first I'll write down here, calling, clue for next step, like that. Now your calling is something that you create in the character creation process, which maybe I'll make another video on in the future to sort of go into more detail of character creation. But basically, this is your reason for why your character is setting out on their adventure into the Colossal, their quest, their personal calling. This can be anything you want, and when you pull the calling prompt from the exploration table, like I have here, it means that in some way you are taking a step closer to achieving that goal. Those will only come up every now and then, but they're an opportunity for you as a storyteller, as I'll get into in a minute, to make that really, really interesting. So for sake of argument now, we're going to say that my calling is to find someone I've lost. And I'm going to say that it's a sibling. So my brother headed out before me. My older brother headed out, but my character's older brother headed out before me. And I am desperate to find any sort of clue or indication of where he's gone. And I've only got old enough and feeling strong enough in myself as an adventurer with my little rookling follower to maybe see if I can find what happened to him. But he's been gone for a while, so it's going to be a long quest, a long journey. So this prompt is going to give me some information about that and potentially give me, because it was a club, it'll give me a clue for where to go next. So after that, I drew the 3 of clubs, and the 3 of clubs here is a staircase leading to another floor in the Colossal. So the Colossal, as you may know, or as described on the website, is an impossibly huge castle, right? Everything I'm exploring is within the walls and ceiling of this impossible structure. So a staircase is a pretty big deal. This will not only lead up to another floor, but it will be absolutely massive in scale, right? So I'm going to write down here, staircase for that one. And then finally, I have the Jack of Spades, which as we know is another face card, therefore it's another combat encounter. And according to here, not combat in this particular case, this is just an unusual encounter. And this is you find an item, and I can consult the item table to discover what I find. So I'm going to put here, item, and then I'm going to find out what item I drew. So in the case of a Jack, I can check this table here and draw against it to see what I draw. So this is the way that players encourage is that you don't do anything to your deck as you're playing. You just keep it shuffled, and then whenever you're asked to draw, you draw from the top of that. So I'm going to do that now, and it's a 3. And according to a 3, it says knowledge. And this is interesting because this can play into the story. I'm already starting to pitch it in my head. So the item is knowledge. I can't spell knowledge. There we go. Right. So with that card done, I can put that into my discard pile. Let's say this is over here. Right. Actually, I'll put that face down so it's not confusing. There we go. Right. So these 5 things, and this is quite quite an exciting exploration phase in my character's first adventure. But this is this is what happened to me on my first day of adventuring. And now I'm in the exciting position of weaving those 5 prompts into my character's first day of adventuring. And I'm faced with a few things that I can actually use to tell that story quite well. I have my calling, which is a clue for where my brother might be. I have the fact that I'm going to receive an item, which is knowledge, and I'm thinking I'm going to combine those 2 things together. I have the fact that I've been captured by non-humanoids, and the fact that there's a massive rook threatening to attack me. And on top of that, I'm going to say that this is all taking place on a staircase, because that's interesting. So if I was to write a journal now, and I'm not going to bore you with just sitting here watching me write a journal out with a pen, but what I would begin saying is my character headed out into the roomlands of the Colossal, looking up at the clouds, passing by the columns holding up the ceiling and the rafters even further above. And I headed out in what I thought was the last direction that I knew my brother had left in. And in traversing these strange lands, I come across a staircase, distant at first, misty, almost like a mountain, hard to recognise. But as I get closer, I realise that that's what this is. And it leads upward to another floor, which would be another room with other lands and oceans and cities and everything above me. And I know my brother, and I know that the reason he set out was for pure adventure, and he would not be able to resist a staircase like this, coupled with the fact that I've seen literally nothing else on my path that would suggest he's taken another route. So in doing so, I decide to reach the foot of the staircase, where there has been, in the first step, which towers above me, like stories high, someone has carved essentially a rudimentary ladder into it for traversal, for adventurers, small adventurers in comparison, like me. So I decide to start climbing. And it's a long climb, but it's made easy by these carvings that have been carved into the staircase. And as I reach the top and my hand breaches over the top of the very top edge, a hand grabs mine. And it's a scaly, weird, unusual hand, a hand with skin like I've never seen before. I'm pulled up almost abruptly without knowing what's going on, and then everything goes black. I've been knocked out. When I come to, I'm in a cage. And I have been captured by, and I'm in a camp now, it seems. Strange creatures I've never even seen before. And all I can think in my head, apart from the fact that it really hurts from that blow in the back of my head, is that I bet my brother was taken by these same people, but I can't see him anywhere. And the camp is small, and there's only one cage, and I'm in it. But then I'm being ignored at the moment by these creatures. And at that moment, I start deciding to look around my imprisonment, my cell. And I realise that there's a few objects that have been left behind, potentially by previous prisoners. And then I find something. It's a piece of clothing that I recognise that my brother had, a scarf that he wore. And not only can I tell that it's his, and therefore I knew that he's been here before, but tucked into it is a map. And he must have been using this map to navigate his next steps. Now this means he's left it behind, but there's a notable next location that I could go to on this map. And maybe if I go there, I will find another clue that will point towards where he is. Unfortunately, the map looks as though it is a map of settlements of these creatures. So I'm going to have to continue to encounter them, which isn't necessarily ideal. But I have a clue where he is, and I found something, a piece of knowledge that tells me where he is and tells me where to go for my next step. The only problem is I am now trapped. And then, at that moment, a huge, massive rook just comes bundling through the camp and just trashing the place. I simultaneously can't believe my luck, or also am filled with terror for this huge opponent creature that's attacking without really any mind or thought as to why. And in the ensuing chaos, incredibly, the people who trapped me are caught off guard, scatter, or are killed by the chaos, and my cage is damaged. The rook wanders off. Now I'm saying this because I've decided that for my first exploration phase, I do not want to get into a fight with a massive rook. So by dictating that I'm avoiding combat, I am stating that it doesn't see me in the cage. It gallivants through, doing immense damage, leaving the camp desolate, and me with an opportunity to escape with an item in my hand, knowledge of where to go next. That is but one example of how I could sew those 5 prompts into a story. And it's up to you to do it however you want. There aren't really any rules in Colossal because I don't want there to be. I want this to be your story, your adventure, to dictate how those prompts are to be used. The only rule is you have to use them all and you have to get creative with how you use them. You'll see that I combined two together. I combined my calling, a clue for where to go next, and the item that I found, which was knowledge, into one. Now, you can do this, you could combine all the prompts together, or you could combine just a few. But the essence of it is that these are prompts, not all individual sequential happenings, but they are opportunities for you to weave interesting stories. And if you see synergies between the prompts, and that gives you an idea or a spark of an idea in your head, that's the idea, right? These prompts are there to inspire and to make you think of a story that maybe you otherwise wouldn't have thought of. I did not plan this at all, right? So hopefully this goes some way to illustrate how quickly and immediately it is possible to generate a story off of the back of 5 simple little prompts. I did not know that I was going to get captured. I did not know that I would get captured on a staircase. I did not know that I would find a clue. I didn't even know I had a brother until I had to start thinking about what my calling was. So this is what I mean. Like, this is a very organic, creative process that is helped and dictated to by the rules, but it's your story to tell. So if I had been playing the game as you might be, I would have written all of that in my journal entry here. This would have been my day's adventuring. And I could have also added to that by drawing a map. Potentially I would have drawn, I could have drawn the fields. There's some grass here, for example. And then maybe the first step of the impossibly huge staircase is here. And then there's the ladder carved into it. And I sort of climb up that, reach the top here, where there is the camp. And these are some rudimentary tents and the cage here that I was kept in, and there are some more tents there and some more grass at the top of the steps, and then the next step continues on behind the camp there. So for example, there could have been a path here that I followed to reach the foot of the staircase, and maybe there's some more places to go around here. Very rudimentary map there, but it gives you an idea of what you could use the map for. And then if you wanted to, you could say that going up the staircase, this is this direction, and you could write page. So we're page 5 here, page 7 here. So I could write page 7 here to dictate that that is where I'm going next in my adventure, and then my map would link up. And maybe if I had a previous journal entry, I could put the page number here in that triangle at the bottom there, and that would link back to that. And then my map would be a contiguous map that covers the entire land that I've explored so far. So hopefully that gives you an idea of how exploration works. Draw some cards, check them against the exploration tables, and then it's up to you to weave those into your character's epic adventure. So I avoided combat in that particular round, but what I want to talk to you now is how combat would work if I wanted to fight that. And for that, I'm going to get rid of these cards because that was that exploration phase done. And I'll put those into the discard pile. And I'm going to propose at this point that I meet a medium-sized rook. So what I'll do is, in the book, I will turn to the section about combat. And what you have to do in combat, before anything else, is you have to create your opponent. And that's what this section of the journal is for. Now, I should say again, this is a templated journal. You don't need to use a templated journal. You don't even need to record your draws and information or map in the same way that I am in your own journal. That's not something you have to do. I've just designed a journal that makes it a little easier to track everything that you've drawn. So if you put the cards away, you can still refer to your prompts. But if you want to just keep a journal that's literally in theme and character with what your character would write, then you could just have a notebook and you can just either use a scrap of paper to record your prompts or just remember them. It shouldn't be too hard to remember them, hopefully. So we're going to propose that we are fighting a medium-sized rook. And if we check this table here, this will give us a sense for our various opponents' combat scores. Now, if you remember, my character class has a combat score of 3. And a medium rook here also has a combat score of 3. This is why I picked it, because I thought it would be on equal terms a little bit. So what we've got to do is create our medium rook opponent first. So this section here, creating your opponent, and it's a rook. The first draw we're going to make is the magic type that this rook wields. Okay, so I'm going to draw a card, and it is a heart, and a heart means rumble. Rumble is a specific type of magic that involves manipulating the earth in a sort of earthquakey, ground shaking, chasm kind of way. So we're going to write down here, magic fit underneath opponent creation for rook. I'm going to put a heart in that box, and I'm going to write rumble for its magic type. This will just be useful for keeping track of what kind of thing I'm fighting. Then I'm going to find out what body type this rook is. And there's only two kinds, attack or defense. And so I'm going to draw, and it's a diamond. No, but most importantly, it's an 8. An 8 or upwards is a defense type. So this is an 8, and it is a defense body type. Now you can imagine this however you like. Again, this is your story. I'm just giving you some prompts. So I'm imagining that it has a huge shield on one arm that like reaches from its face right down to the floor. Then, continuing on in the creation of your opponent, we need to know what kind of weapon it's carrying, whether it's a ranged attacker or a melee one. You may have an idea in your head. Oh, I wish it was this kind, but you've got to be true to the cards and see what you draw. Okay, so I'm going to draw a 2, and a 2 says that it's ranged. That was actually what I had in my head, so that's worked out quite nicely. So a 2 is ranged. There we go. Because a defensive rook, I feel, would probably fight defensively, so therefore from afar. And then finally, you need to find out what your reward for winning this fight will be. Okay, so you have to draw to check what it will be, and it's based on the suit. So here we go. It's a spade, and that means I'm going to get a helm. Now a helm is there's a type of class called the helmed who can wear a piece of a rook on their head, and they gain access to the magical powers of that rook. So potentially, even though I've started my character's adventure as a followed, I could also have a helm as well as my rookling. And this is how your character's strength starts to grow, because multi-classing kind of becomes exactly how your characters grow. So if I win this, and I hope I do, I could be winning a sweet stone hat for my character, which would be amazing. So with my character established, I'm going to put these cards away because I have it all noted down here. You could, of course, put yours to the side and keep them as a reference if you wanted to, if you didn't want to make notes of them. But I'll put them in my discard pile for now, because we're going to get into combat now. So, without getting into all the detail of the book, because this video is intended as a sort of overview for how the game works, I'm just going to describe to you the essence of how combat proceeds step by step. So, I have a combat score of 3, and what I need to do is draw a number of cards equal to my combat score and place them in front of me. And that will give me my knowledge of what attacks I'm going to have available to me this turn. So, I have a 3, I have a 9, and I have a 10. This is actually quite a good draw, particularly for a low combat score like 3, because the number is all that matters here. This is the most important part of this, right? So I'm going to put my attacks over here. These are ready to face the attacks that will come from the rook that I'm fighting. Now, the rook I'm fighting has a combat score of 3, which means it is going to attack 3 times. But we resolve each of those in sequence, one by one. We don't reveal them all out like we revealed my attacks. I have my bank of ready attacks of what I know I can do. The rook is going to provide its attacks. To you, you won't be able to see what it's going to do next. That's the whole idea. So you've got to face each attack as they come. So, what's important in terms of beating each round of combat is the number. If you can if you can beat it, then you don't take a wound, and that counts as 1 successful wound against your opponent. If you can beat the majority of the opponent's attacks, then you win. But for every round that you can't beat its attack, you will take a wound. And the way you take a wound is you lose 1 from one of your stats, either exploration or combat. This can be devastating to you, but obviously you can choose which stat you take damage from. And there are ways to heal those stats back up as well. So it's not everything, but this is why you can take some damage early on in the game and then maybe choose to avoid combat after that point because you are considerably weaker. But you can write that into your journal. Maybe you've broken a leg, maybe you've got a scar, Add all of this flavour to your character's journal because this is interesting. This is exciting stuff, right? So, also, you can, if your number equals that of your incoming attack, that's a clash. That's where your attack and their attack don't do damage to either of you. This is good because this means you don't receive a wound, but it means you survive damage, right? It doesn't count towards your majority for winning the battle, but it does prevent you from taking damage, and that could be a strategic choice to make. Also, there's critical hits. If your counterattack beats the incoming attack and is of the same suit, then that's a critical hit. You can come up in your journal with how that is resolved, but a critical hit decreases the opponent's remaining attacks by 1, so they won't strike again if it's the second from last, for example. This would mean that for beating its majority, the majority is now potentially easier to achieve. So I'll win if I can beat the majority of them. Let's see how this combat goes down. The first attack from the opponent rook is a 2. This this is incredibly lucky, and I swear to you, I did not stack this deck. I shuffled it before I began this. So their first attack, I'm going to meet that, obviously, with my lowest card, my 3, which means I beat it, and that's 1 round of combat down. Let's see what I face next. A joker. Now, I haven't actually written into the rules what a joker means. I have left these deliberately open for you to potentially homebrew ideas into, or come up with your own ideas for what they mean when they occur. That's kind of a deliberate choice to make your storytelling more interesting. In this particular case, it doesn't really help me with what I'm trying to describe, so I'm going to draw another card for that attack, and it's a 9. Now, this is interesting. This is where a bit of the strategy might come in, because I could beat this attack with a 10. But then that would leave me with my lowest, with a 9 left, and I don't know what's coming next. With a 10, I've got a higher chance of beating whatever comes next, and I've already beaten 1 round, so I would beat the majority. So I think what I'm going to opt to do is clash. I don't take a wound, but I also don't do any damage to my opponent. So I'm still only 1 attack down. I need to beat his next attack to beat him and get that reward. Let's see what happens. It's an ace. In this particular case, an ace is 1. So I can beat it with my 10, place that against it, deal 2 wounds to my opponent, which is the majority for its combat score, and I have defeated that rook. That means I get access to the reward. If I hadn't beaten it, i.e. if I'd clashed too much or taken too many wounds to not deal the majority of damage, the rook would have got away and left me either dead, if that had taken me down to 0 in one of my stats, or it would have left me wounded, but it would have just gone on. It was no longer interested. The battle is over, whether or not I die or it dies. But in this particular case, I won. So not only does that give me a helm, which is very exciting, and I can describe in my journal how and what my character does with that helm. On top of that, we're now faced with writing up this combat. Now, this is where potentially a bit more story fun comes from. You've had the fun of actually combating the rook and dealing with its various attacks, but these attacks all mean different things. So different suits mean different kinds of attacks, and you could therefore write the story of how that battle went down using those suits and those descriptions to make it more interesting. So, for example, the first strike that the rook does, according to a club, is a weapon attack. Now, we stated that it was ranged, so I imagine it has a ballista, a huge arrow shooting device, like a big bow, basically, mounted on the top of its impossibly high shield. So it fires that straight at me. But because I beat that attack, I'm going to say that, and deal damage back to it, I'm going to say that my character nimbly dodges that first strike. But because it had to slam its shield into the ground in order to create a strong foundation to shoot that first strike, its shield is wedged in the ground temporarily. I run up to that shield, and using my follower, who's my little rookling friend, I jump onto his head and gain purchase onto the shield itself, which is cracked and covered in like damages and cracks and things. I climb to the top of that, stood on top of this shield, like face to face with this rook, which isn't huge, but it's medium sized, but still pretty big. With my weapon, which would have decided in character building, but I'm going to say I carry a two-handed sword with me. I'm going to slice the column that connects that ballista to the top of that and disconnect that completely, smashing it to the ground. So that's my first wound. Then the next strike that comes is I should mention actually that. Apologies. Yeah. So my attack is classed as an unarmed attack because it struck with a weapon, but I defended with a spade. So rather than saying I attacked with my sword, we'll say that I wrenched that ballista free using literally just my own strength from the top of that. So it's an unarmed attack. So the next attack that came from the rook was a heart, and a heart attack is a magic attack. Now we've already stated that it's rumble, right? So the rook, in an attempt to get me off of its body, because I'm now stood atop its shield, uses its magic. You see its eyes flash for a second, a strange sort of deep blue sort of colour, and then the ground shakes like an earthquake. But I don't fall. It doesn't shake me free because, of course, I met that attack and we clashed. I didn't do any damage to it, so I'm going to state that all I do is hang on for dear life, staying in position and not letting it hurt me. My diamond that I clashed with would technically qualify as a creative attack, which is an opportunity for you in the story to sort of dictate how that goes down, which means that you do have the freedom to potentially say, well, all I do in this particular case is hang on. You could be more interested in that. Creative attack could be things like tripping it up or blinding it somehow, maybe covering what you presume are its eyes, that sort of thing. But in this particular case, I'm just going to say I hung on for dear life. Then the final attack from the rook is another club, which is a weapon attack. Now, obviously, I've ripped that ballista free, so for a weapon attack to resolve, there would have to be another weapon I wasn't ready for. And simply put, it has a flail in its other hand. I hadn't noticed this. I've been so consumed with the shield and the ballista that its other hand had been out of sight, and that comes around, swinging this huge arm, holding a ball, spiked ball on a chain made of stone. And I counter that with a weapon attack as well, because I beat it with a club. So what I'm going to state here is that I do have a sword, as stated earlier, and all I simply do is, as that strike comes towards me, I realise not only is it going to miss, but I can use this to my advantage to take this rook down. So praying, as I do so, I take a wide stance stood upon this shield, and I raise my sword up and just fix my stance. And the blade cuts through the chain. It's a stone chain, and it's old, and it's battered, and it potentially would have broken anyway, but this was my hope, this was my dream. My blade cuts clean through the chain, and the way it changes the trajectory of the ball means the ball swings hard around in a new direction and smashes the rook into its head, killed and defeated by its own huge attack. And with that, the rook's head shatters, falls, and the whole rook starts to fall, and I, expertly, slide down the shield, sort of Legolas style, to safety. And the beauty of that whole sort of final blow is that because it took damage to its head, my reward, a helm, kind of makes sense, because I was able to shatter the head and gain a piece of that, which I can then potentially wear as my reward for the battle. So that would be how I would then take what occurred beat by beat in the card draws for combat and turn that into a creative story, a moment in my character's adventures, and tell the tale of how I took down this medium rook in battle. You can do it either way. You could do it as writing the journal entry after each attack, which is potentially quite interesting, although potentially it's more believable that if your character wouldn't be writing in the middle of a fight, would write the battle up afterwards, but it's completely up to you. You could write it as you go, or what I recommend is doing what I did here, laying out the attacks so you have them as reference. You can see how the whole battle went out. You've got a sort of record of the battle in cards in front of you, and then you can refer to the rules and your own imagination as you write it up in your journal and tell the tale of your incredible exploits of taking down an impossible opponent. So that gives you a sense of it. That's both exploration and combat. There's a lot more to Colossal in between that. There's not only other rules in this book that dictate other places you can go and other things you can explore and find and other kinds of opponents you can fight as well. But there's also further books as well. There's books that add more expansions to the rules and additions to how the game can be played and the kind of things your characters and new classes as well, the kind of things your characters can do. But it all kind of hinges around this sort of central mechanic of exploration and combat and how those two play out. So hopefully this video gives you a sort of sense of what playing Colossal is going to feel like, the core gameplay loop, as we say, and like, if this sounds like something where you can enjoy yourself and apply a bit of imagination and creativity to writing up your character's incredible exploits, then hopefully this is the game for you. Hopefully this has given you a sort of outline of how it all plays and how it all works. And I'd like to do some more videos like this in the future that maybe go into some more of the nitty-gritty of other parts of the Colossal, as well as maybe lore videos and taking you through some of the other books and how some of those expansions and additions to the game work. But for now, if you like what you saw and would like to pick up a copy of Colossal, then all you have to do is head to www.colossal.com and head to the shop on there, and you can buy the base book, you can buy the journal, and this deck of cards will be available very soon as well. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy your adventures out in the Runelands.